So my first question goes to Beri. Beri, what is or are currently the most noticeable changes in the agency business from your perspective?
So probably two massive fundamental changes. Firstly, the role of procurement, particularly in the world of client side. So procurement has dramatically changed the face of communications and advertising, and making sure you get enough bang for the buck, and making sure that everything is driven by cost, or too much probably driven by cost. The knock-on effect of that, of course, is how agencies are structured, and of course, how agencies have to change their structure in order to accommodate the changes of clients. And the other big change, I think, is the expectation of people. Particularly a newer audience, so a millennial audience, differs very much to people of my generation. Their expectations are different. And therefore, unfortunately, many agencies haven't adapted to this. I can give you a really good example that one big agency came out and said, we're going to reinvent ourselves by focusing on the work. Work, work, work was their mantra. So everything is about the work. And what they forgot, really, is that actually people make the work. And my fundamental belief is that people drive creativity, culture drives creativity. And if you build your company around a creative culture, and you determine your creative culture, and you're true to your beliefs, you'll transform your business and stay ahead of the game.
In the talk before this panel, you mentioned that young talents demand so much more than previous generation did. Can you explain this a little bit? What kind of demands?
Well, I came into the industry, I'm embarrassed to say, in 1995. It was an awful long time ago. I actually look like I'm a boy band member about to step off the stage and sing a solo. I'm so dated. But when I came into the world of advertising, I thought, my God, I'm really, really lucky to have a job. And I think that I suppose the millennial audience, I think, well, you're lucky to have me. And actually, what their expectations are versus mine aren't necessarily wrong. They're just very, very different. And a great example of us not adapting to that from an advertising agency point of view is working mums. How do you bring working mums back into the world of communications? And we've got a really strong policy on that, and it's absolutely essential. And I firmly believe a working mum can do the job of a man in 4 days that it takes a man 5 or maybe even 6, and that's why they have to work the weekend. But the point I'm making is that we haven't adapted to the needs of people. A great mate of mine in Australia, he went from advertising to a tech brand. And he realized, or they realized, that people were more profitable and more productive, or more productive, therefore more profitable, towards the beginning of the week than the end of the week. So what they did to radically change was, let's not work on a Wednesday. Keep the wages the same, keep the salary the same, but Wednesday is a day off. So they almost go 2 days, 1 day, 2 days, 2 days, 2 days. The point is they broke up the week, and therefore it made people re-engage on a Thursday, Friday. So, I mean, this is obviously very British culture. It's sort of, well, let's go out and get absolutely hammered on a Thursday night, and we'll coast all the way through Friday, and then it'll be Saturday and be fine. But actually, with a different work ethic, was Monday, Tuesday are sort of pivotal days. Why don't you have Thursday, Friday as the new Monday, Tuesday by putting Wednesday in the middle of it? The net result is happier people and more profitable as a business, and much more effective and efficient.
Thank you. Alicia, let's stay a little bit longer with the staff. The quality of the employee experience can drive change from within. You are leading the digital factory, what is kind of an idea incubator within Air France. Can you tell us a bit more how this project has started and what's the role of it today?
Sure. So the Digital Factory, Air France recognized and saw the emergence of all these digital studios, creative studios that big companies were implementing to sort of get out of their heavy structures. And we asked ourselves, do we need that? And the Digital Factory was really founded by one woman who had a mission and a vision, and who spent a lot of time researching and benchmarking these different initiatives, and made the case to the executive committee, got the budget, and started in 2018. And then we have opened our doors of the actual place, the Digital Factory, in October 2018.
So it's a pretty young project.
Very young project, yes. And so the Digital Factory is really founded on, it is an accelerator, it is a key to transformation, and founded on 3 principles of promoting design thinking and agile methodologies, promoting collaboration between silos, which is something very difficult in big companies, and making sure that we're really at the service of all the different lines of business of Air France. So engineering and maintenance, ground services, pilots, there's a lot of activity within Air France. And it's really about, we also provide a place, and that's been extremely powerful in having a place where people feel encouraged and safe to work in a different way. And it's really about a design mindset and having people feel good about their jobs and do things in a different way. And I think that the design mindset and designers is really the key to the future of designing the future for.
Although it's a pretty young project, do you have any results you can, or do you have benefits you can already see or recognize?
If we look at an employee experience on a bigger level than the Digital Factory, yes, we have a new president, we have a new general director, Anne Regai, one of the first women.
But this was not the result of the
This is not the result
factory.
of the Digital Factory, but things are changing within Air France.
Okay.
And we actually, we see people being transformed. We see people coming into the Digital Factory with their projects, and we lead them through the new methodology, and we collaborate, and it ends up with, in general, it's either a prototype or a most viable product. And people are happy. You really see the smiles on their faces. We have a lot of testimonials. Okay. It's sometimes hard to make a link to a gain in like turnover or something, but it's part of the whole transformation of Air France and trying to foster good feeling of our employees. And I think that employee experience is really the new frontier of competitiveness, of driving results from the inside out.
Do you work pretty close with HR in this project, or is it totally separate from it?
Yes, HR is definitely one of our main clients at the Digital Factory, and so helping them to define the employee experience. But the employee experience is not just HR, it's also communications. It's basically everything that touches your day at work. So it's much larger than that. Okay,
thanks a lot. Dan, we just learned that the staff is pretty important and can also form a brand and a company. But today's marketing, the theories say the brand belongs to the customer. And as you are in pretty close contact with customers, do we share this view? And if yes, how does AllSaints react to that?
Yeah, and I think I mirror what we've just said as well about the expectation of the customer, and I think it's up to us as brands to react to that and keep up with it. I think when Uber was founded 10 years ago, I think the average wait time was 7 minutes for an Uber, and that was fine. And now it's kind of, if it's any longer than 2, and we're kind of hovering over the cancel button. I think now consumers expect to be able to buy something on their mobile phone in bed at night, get it delivered the next day, try it on, refund it, and not be charged anything for that experience. So, I think it's really important as brands, and one thing we're really passionate about at AllSaints is creating a culture where we can be agile and we can, react to whatever the future holds. I think probably a bigger challenge that we face is as consumer expectation changes, we are getting better with technology at being able to solve problems. But that's having a knock-on effect of our store teams as well, as their role evolves. They're being asked to do things like store fulfillment, where they were never asked to do this before. So I actually see the people side of it a bigger challenge to overcome what the growing expectations are from the consumer versus, maybe the technology side.
Do you have an example, something that surprises you, or how the consumer expectation changed compared to 3 years ago, or?
Not really. I think for us, it's always been about trying to figure out what the next thing is and what the consumer is wanting. We're really passionate about things like Net Promoter Score in the business, so we measure that as opposed to things like sales and conversion rate, which are really important, but we use NPS as a kind of internal gauge as to what our consumer and our customers are wanting, so that we can direct internal resource to be able to fix that.
So from my perspective, fashion is a pretty emotional and personal thing, and now you mentioned some of those neutral methods.
Yeah.
How do you balance this rational approach that is calculatable, and how do you react with, let's say, with the emotional component of your brand and products and things?
No, I agree. Fashion is kind of personal, but also quite universal. So what you wear and what you don't wear is quite a key way of self-expression, especially now. We've got a really great internal creative team, which luckily for me, they look after all the kind of campaigns and that kind of thing. But I think more than ever, we've got to remain relevant to the customer. So I think it's just about how we can spread happy messages. We are a fashion brand, but we, at the same time, we're in the business of kind of high expectations, and we're in the business of feelings and perceptions, and we're competing against not only other fashion brands, but a holiday abroad or an experience and those kind of things. So it's up to our creative team, luckily for me, to be able to create those kind of joyful feelings whenever we launch a campaign.
So there's still room for spontaneous ideas and experiments.
Yeah, and I think how we're set up internally, the way that we communicate between teams, the way that we communicate externally to customers as well, using things like Olympic and UGC and trying to incorporate our customers and bring them along with us, that allows for a small bit of spontaneity. And I think as a brand, we've kind of built ourselves on that as well. We aren't as rigid. Sometimes we probably should be a little bit more organized and a bit more rigid, but we aren't, and we're still able to be quite agile as we kind of move forward.
Okay. Tom, talking about the relationship of emotion and function, this is, as a typography fan, I immediately think of typefaces, because they also balance with these attributes. And this might surprise some people in the hall, maybe, but it's not your fault. Type is a sophisticated medium that does its job in the secret often, or in the background, and it's often not obvious. In reality, type unites exactly what we are talking about right now: form and function, emotion and reason. Are typefaces actually also subject of trends?
Yeah, definitely. Like any part of visual culture or the brand component, we have trends emerge. But I think it's important to kind of think about, especially in the context of this conversation, trends versus successes. Because trends aren't always a good thing. Because trends can, so for example, trends often emerge in the type world as a reaction to a successful typeface. So something that's done something new, something very different, an innovation somewhere, whether it be for a brand or as a library release. And that can spark a trend. But everything that comes after that success is, in a way, feeding back into the risk of trend, because it's copying something else, it's trying to emulate a success somewhere else. And I think it's kind of, when we talk about, again, the role of typography and its responsibility in a brand, as an invisible component is a good way to put it. In terms of creating a good experience, it has a really sort of kind of quite hardcore functional problem to solve, whether that be for, you talked about consumer demands in new digital experiences. Typefaces need to be almost invisible there and super reliable and enhance that experience by being reliable. That's their purpose. But then they also have to impart some level of brand expression and emotion. And again, that's the trick, that's the kind of skill of the typographer, the type designer, to create that sort of experience. So if you're completely trend-driven with your typographic decisions, you can very much run the risk of undermining your overall brand sort of ambition and expression and requirements by making maybe trend-led decisions. Now, trends are important because trends promote innovation and they kind of push things and they lead to the next thing. And it's not about kind of saying that trends are not as important to brand expression and to our industry, particularly as type designers, but it's about understanding and being able to identify, you know, what part of a trend is appropriate for a brand, and when you're having a conversation to a company about their typographic choice that you're making those decisions based on real, like, emotional, so brand and functional needs, rather than saying, oh, well, the client asked me for something that looks like that, so I'm going to give them something that looks like that. So it's a very pragmatic decision and a very pragmatic conversation, but it has a far-reaching effect if you get it wrong.
You're often contributing to custom typeface designs. What are the drivers in this field? Do companies come to you and say, we want a trendy typeface, or do you analyze them from inside out? What's your profile and what do you really need?
Yeah, that often is a part of the conversation. That usually is almost like a legacy part of the conversation. A typographic choice may be made based on, you know, a trend or a style. But then when you get into the nuts and bolts and you start to speak to the client and you say, well, actually, why did you choose that typeface? Well, actually, let's talk about your brand expression. How do we best kind of develop your brand expression typographically? Think about this might sit on your brand for 10 years. Maybe this typographic choice that you made this 6 months ago actually will look dated in 2 years' time. Let's think about what your long-term needs are in terms of expression. Then let's look at your language support requirements. Where does this have to exist? How many languages does it need to support? What script systems? Let's look at your technical requirements. What environments are you selling your product in? Where does it have to work on billboards, on smartwatches? And then, you know, let's think about also the range of voice that you need. Do you need 10 weights or 3 weights? So having these conversations really early on and challenging that, those briefs is really important, because it's about, again, looking at, yes, trend is a driver in starting conversations, but it's not always the thing that kind of makes the final decision around brand expression and technical requirements.
Thanks. Now let's talk about the future. There are currently a lot of challenges in branding and marketing. Some are self-made. Others simply come up to us because our industry is changing. So we have internal changes and external changes. I'd like to continue again with Dan. Do you feel prepared for the future of your brand? And what are the biggest challenges to master the future from your perspective?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, I don't think anybody knows what's coming. You know, I think there are certain parts of the future that people say they know, you know, whether it's mobile first and on all this kind of stuff. But I think the best thing to do, and that's the approach that we're taking in AllSaints, is just to allow ourselves that spontaneity and allow ourselves to be agile, whether that's in our internal processes, whether, like I said, we use kind of Google and Google Plus as a way to communicate between the teams. We're really transparent between departments as well. So the biggest thing for us is to just give ourselves the ability to react if and when something comes up.
Mm. So especially in the field of fashion, the expectations of the customers are changing. We have a lot of discussions about, you know, being sustainable, taking care of the environment. Mm-hmm. People don't want to change their clothes, probably not so often as in former times. So the collections, I think you say, they don't change every 4 weeks, but maybe, you know, every quarter. Is there any trend in this direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think I read something a few months ago that said 52% of young people, you know, take sustainability into account when they're making a purchase. So it's definitely something that's been growing for a while. Things like reselling, upcycling, these are all trends that, you know, personally, not necessarily from an AllSaints perspective, but me personally, I see those trends as something that are just going to continue to grow, as opposed to, you know, virgin products that are being produced. So yeah, I think these are things that brands are going to have to take into account. And I know there are some that are already, Farfetch I think have just launched a resale site, and I've certainly purchased reselling businesses recently anyway. So yeah, those are kind of trends that I see as just going to grow.
Okay, let's go back to air transport, Alicia, which is constantly changing. How is Air France preparing for the future? Or to put it more precisely, how do you prepare for it inwardly?
Okay, well, Air France is going through some big changes in this year to come, and I think on a global level you'll see that the airline industry will have a lot of innovation coming in the next couple years, because
like drones?
Things like drones, perhaps, yeah. Well, maybe we'll start talking more about transporting in general, and then the environment obviously is going to have, is driving part of that. So it's an extremely complex, extremely regulated industry, so with a lot of actors that have to fit together. So I think a lot of those innovations could come from that, to have it less of a, more of a hassle-free experience. As we know, like whether you take the train or a plane, it's quite a different scene at this point. As I mentioned, we are driving the change from the internal towards externally, and the really putting a focus on that. And well, I think that will be another element. I think the biggest changes, however, will come entirely within the industry as far as innovation.
Beri, from an outside perspective, we always think, agencies are the most agile and flexible institutions, much more flexible than industries or a company, industrial company. Is this really the case from your perspective or in your experience?
No, I think that we are probably more underprepared than perhaps we let on sometimes. I think the best way to prepare for change is to accept the fact that you're not properly prepared for it. We like to think that we're innovative, and of course we are to a degree, and we like to think we're fleet of foot and nimble. But the fact is, our clients know more about their business than we do. So Alicia knows more about air travel. Dan, obviously, knows more about fashion. So, but the one thing that you can prepare for is your culture, as I sort of said earlier, that the one thing we get asked when it comes down to the crunch before we get appointed or not by a client is, well, what's your culture like? And if you can properly articulate why, what it is that you're about, you're more likely to create a partnership with a client and a brand than if you don't. It's that Simon Sinek quote that if people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I think if you know that and you can articulate that and prepare and be flexible enough culturally to adapt to needs of clients and also to the needs of your people, you have more chance of being successful regardless of the innovation that's coming our way, whether that be through AI or whatever it is. And for me, creativity always going to trump AI.
Thank you. One final question for all of you. If you were to pick just one thing that you believe will drive significant change to your business, positive or negative, what would that be? Tom?
Good question. I think changing habits and changes in the way the fonts are, particularly for my industry, fonts are marketed and sold and made available. Because we talk about many very
one thing.
Sorry.
Keep it short.
But yeah, I think that aspect is quite, for me, is going to change a lot.
Okay. Dan?
I think the sustainability and the upcycling, that the reduction in virgin products being produced will be huge.
Beri?
Brexit. If we carry on letting the government do it, it's going to rip the arse out of the British economy, so I think it's a fucking bad idea.
Okay.
Alicia?
I would tend to agree. I mean, it's my personal, but I believe that the environment is really a key factor, and that will drive the innovation that's going to change the airline industry.
So you see it positive.
Yes. Always.
Thank you very much for coming.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.